Hello, my astrology family. This is Lada from AstroLada.com, and we're here with an astrology lesson. I love doing those, going deep into the astrology, and I'm going to try to explain to you how to do aspects, how to interpret aspects like a pro. Because we all know, if you're into astrology, we all know that in our horoscopes, planets have angular connections with each other, which means they communicate and they connect different topics of your consciousness, of your life with each other. For example, aspects can be when two planets are opposite each other, extremely powerful. When they're together, it's called conjunction. When they are like 90 degrees from each other, they form 90 degrees aspect. That's called a square. When they entwine, these are the easier aspects, and in sextiles, things flow between those two areas of life. But we usually just know from online and from books. Usually they just give us the interpretation of, say, if you have Saturn opposition Mercury, what it means. And this is very important. Let's look at that aspect. For example, Saturn opposition Mercury. Opposition means they look across from each other. This is Mercury, this is Saturn. I'm putting Mercury in Aries, Saturn in Libra. And you'd read from, textbooks that, well, this means that your thinking, which is Mercury, can be a bit slower. You need time to ponder over things to understand them in depth. It can mean that you have inadequacies, because Saturn shows, especially till your 40s almost, where you feel not good enough, where you feel stagnant somehow or challenged. So such people might feel like they feel kind of, especially when they have to talk, they feel overwhelmed. They have to measure their words very carefully, because Saturn usually give us repercussions and criticism. Especially the opposition involves another person. So those people learn from very young that if they say something wrong, Mercury is what you communicate, what you say, it can come back to them and strike them, and it can antagonize people. And Saturn means to be judged, to be resented about something. So they learn to shut their mouth, or they learn to be very careful and considerate and measure their words. Again, this is very Saturnian, to measure, to be cautious. And especially to their 30s or even mid-30s, they might have some even speech impediment. They might have some kind of a a bit thinking that might be afraid to speak up in a group, not to be thought of stupid, or even at school, because Mercury rules your schoolmates, your environment, your mates overall. They might have said things that backfired on them, so they learn to keep, to suppress what they're saying, for example. And this can also depress, because Saturn is a depressing planet, your confidence in communications. But with age, even the difficult aspect can give masterfulness, because the Saturn aspect in particular, because you keep trying it over and over and over till you become master at it. So even the difficult aspects have their good side, but difficult aspects like the opposition and the square, they mean that you have some kind of, you're taken out of your comfort zone. You have to confront, and you would experience these themes, Mercury, Saturn together, for example. You cannot avoid them. You should not run away from them, but there would always be some kind of resistance. And it's almost like external circumstances push you into coming out of your comfort zone with those things that you don't feel comfortable about. Particularly Saturn, Mercury is now very much about communication, and this is an aspect I have. That's why I'm giving it as an example. Because till the age of 30, I had such problem communicating with people that I would be even shy to enter a shop and ask how much something cost. Or when people would say hi to me, I'll turn the other way out of shyness, because I didn't want to speak, because I was worried I'll say something stupid. And look at me now, 9 years later, I'm coming live, and it was the biggest fear. It took me out of my comfort zone. I was forced to learn to communicate properly, because I was fired. There was nothing I could do, and I had to start doing astrology. You doubt your intellectual skills as well. With Saturn opposition Mercury, you doubt how good of a communicator you are. And I was thrown exactly into that career by force. I really didn't want it. I really was too afraid. That was my biggest fear, like public speaking or speaking at all with this aspect. But it's forceful aspect, the opposition. You can't escape it, and you master it at one moment. But this is very psychological when you interpret just Saturn opposition Mercury or Saturn trine Mercury or whatever. I want to dig deep and show you how just the aspect between two planets, how you can look at it from 9 levels, actually 8 levels, sorry. And this is what I will be teaching in my on my course, which is a few months on aspects. I'll be teaching exactly how to interpret aspects. I'll start from the very beginning, and I'll cover absolutely all the combinations between planets, but we'll cover it from a very different angle. Because when Mercury and Saturn, let's continue, as one aspect, you might have 20 aspects in your horoscope, but we're just looking at one. So we talked about the general meaning, but where is that inclination to be more depressed, to think more negative, because this is also Mercury thinking, Saturn be depressed, always expect the worst when you're planning, or to feel very pushed into administrative and business tasks, which is again Mercury. Saturn is to be forced into something because of the opposition and not liking it, feeling overwhelmed, but still having to do it, and eventually learning. You have resistance towards it, but you learn it. Where does it come from? It does not show you anything. You have to look deeper into the aspects. And how do we do that? We look what houses Saturn and Mercury rule. And if you have, for example, Aquarius rising, Mercury, and you can see the rulership. You see Mercury rules those signs, Virgo and Gemini, you see? Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. So you look way in your horoscope, as counted from your ascendant, where those signs that are ruled by those two planets. So Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. So Gemini is 1, you count always with the ascendant sign as the first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mercury rules the 5th house, where Gemini is. And Mercury rules also 6, 7, 8, and the 8th house. So you write it down. Mercury is the ruler in an Aquarius ascendant. It's a bit complex, but a lot of you that watch this video know what rulerships are. I would explain it in the course in depth, of course. We'll cover all this. So Mercury becomes the ruler of the 5th and the 8th. And Saturn from Aquarius rising, Saturn, you see, rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Where Capricorn and Aquarius from Aquarius rising is the 1st house and the 12th house. So you write again on the Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of the 1st and the 12th. So now you can start combining the ruler of the 1st opposition the ruler of the 5th. The ruler of the 1st, which is Saturn, opposition the ruler of the 8th. The ruler of the 12th, opposition the ruler of the 5th, Mercury. The ruler of the 12th, Saturn, opposition the ruler of the 8th, Mercury. And then, so this is 4 combinations. It's one combination here, just the general meaning of the 2 planets. That will give you usually more psychological understanding about the person. Then there is 4 other combinations that give you the details, specific areas of one's life that can be more challenging, that will be still connected in some way. And I'll give you interpretations of it to see how incredibly profound information you can get from this. And then you go further. You can check the rule of the 1st house opposition Mercury. So Saturn is the rule of the 1st house opposition Mercury, and interpret that without including the rulership of Mercury. And then you can interpret the ruler of the 12th opposition Mercury, and then you can interpret Saturn opposition the ruler of the 5th and the ruler of the 8th, which is Mercury, which is formal combinations. So we get 9 from just 2 planets opposite each other. We get 9 interpretations that connect different areas of your life. It connects 4 houses in your horoscope, plus the houses that they're in. In the case of Aquarius, it's in mental houses, 3rd and 9th. So this will be a lot in the mind of the person. And of course, in the course, we'll learn what each house means, but each house has a few key words. Let's quickly see how this is done. So Saturn is the ruler of the 1st, opposite the ruler of the 5th, Mercury. This is the first interpretation. Let's see what this can mean. The ruler of the 1st is you and your physical body. And the ruler of the 5th is rules, love life, children, your creativity, your self-confidence. So one interpretation, it's a challenging aspect, which means you're confronted into those things, that you have resistance towards that. Rule of the first is you. So you kind of resist fifth house things. You can resist your child. Fifth house ruler is your child, for example. You can have like a face off. Your firstborn in particular is the rule of the fifth. And when the rule of the first and the fifth are in opposition, it means that there is a power struggle, you know, they're kind of confronting each other. And of course, you can see what the reason behind this, especially the first child can be, you know, more oppositional in nature, can trigger your buttons, let's say, because he's the fifth house ruler opposite you. And you can feel triggered, even though he might not trigger the other parent if the other parent doesn't have that. So why would the child be reacting like that? Well, the rule of the first is Saturn. It's you. And Saturn means discipline. You're trying to do discipline, but maybe you're not, you know, and the child is challenging you on that, you know, and the child is ruled by Mercury. Maybe he speaks out, you know, maybe he says words that are not correct, maybe that are not right, you know, with communication. Maybe he shouts. This is mercurial side. So you see how, and this is all true in my case. Fifth house is also romantic life. When the rule of the first and the fifth are opposite each other, one is kind of almost they can be some, they can feel uncomfortable, let's say, or put out of their comfort zone, especially at the beginning of relationships. They can feel, especially the romantic part of relationships, you know, and even in a marriage, they can feel a little bit kind of, you know, because opposition can compartmentalize things and project them. So they can feel upset with their partner for not being romantic. But it's part of their psyche. They're doing something, you know. And of course, where can the problems in the romantic life come? Well, the ruler of the first is Saturn, opposition the ruler of the fifth. Maybe too much work, you know, too many responsibility, and the person ruler of the first themselves forgets to take care of the romantic life because there is too many responsibility, because Saturn is the ruler of the first. Too many insecurities. Anyone who has Saturn as the rule of the first house has insecurities. It's, you know, this is natural. They're late bloomers. Saturn is a planet that blooms late, and they have the insecurities and they project them on their romantic partners. They project them onto their love life. Plus, person with the rule of the first opposite the rule of the fifth might be forced into creative outlets, even if they did not want to. And ruler of the fifth rules anything you create yourself, like a business or something. And this is exactly what happened to me. I did not want to be creative. I did not, I was forced, because opposition is something by force. You have resistance towards it. And of course, the rule of the fifth house is Mercury. I was pushed into a mercurial business. Mercury is one of the planets that rules astrology, communication, media, writing, speaking. You see, it's not bad. It's just how you get there is hard when it's a difficult aspect. But again, it's intrinsic part of your life. And you just, when you consult a client or something, you say, well, it's going to be hard, but it's part of your destiny, you know. And plus you have to see the planets that are making the oppositions. Are they friends or enemies? If they're enemies, it'll be quite much harder. Even when you master it and you learn to do it and it doesn't feel out of your comfort zone, you'd not enjoy doing it so much. You'd put stress on you. But if they're friends, or sometimes is one planet is a friend to the other and the other is neutral, or the other is enemy, or sometimes both are friends or both are neutral. Or in the case, and I'll teach you in the course which planets are friends, which are not. For example, Sun and Mars, they have similar nature. Even a difficult aspect between Sun and Mars tends to help each other. Eventually you do something good with it. Saturn and Venus and Mercury, the three of them are friends. Mercury Venus aspect, Saturn Venus, Mercury Venus. Yes, they'll create some problems and resistance, but you can do a great job with them eventually. So in this case, it's Saturn Mercury aspect. So Mercury is a friend of Saturn. It means Mercury helps Saturn. So yes, despite the aspect is difficult, you know, this, in the case Mercury being the creative fifth house ruler, some creative endeavor or personal business that you develop, that is your own idea, might be kind of almost enforced on you by circumstances. You might be resisting it, but it eventually helps you on your path. It helps Saturn, the ruler of the first house. And the fifth house is also, ruler first, opposition fifth. This is just the simple children, romantic love, and also dating. Before I got married, dating, it was always some pain involved there. I was quite immature partners as well. I would choose. I mean, older in age, but immature, because the rule of the fifth is Mercury. But still, there is some difficulty there in your romantic life when the rule of the first and fifth are in difficult aspect. But of course, because one is friend to the other, they help, because Mercury, the rule of the fifth, is friend to Saturn. They help me grow. They fortified me. Okay, but also Saturn is the rule of the first, while Mercury is the rule of the eighth. So what happens if the rule of the first is opposite the rule of the eighth? That's another interpretation. The rule of the first opposite the rule of the eighth. Well, the rule of the eighth house is known as a house of crisis, as a house of something suddenly goes wrong and your life turns upside down. And this is definitely when you have the rule of the first opposite the eighth. You do not want it. You're not drawn to those things. They happen to you. They're part of your path in life. You can't escape it. This is exactly what happened. It's like rule of first and eighth. You can become from pauper to a king, from a king to pauper. This has happened for me a few times, that my destiny totally flipped. And there is also, and it puts you in pressure, it stresses you out. But it's also the ruler of the eight means mysteries, the occult, because when your life suddenly flips, when there is a death, for example, rule of eight rules death, rules, divorces, sudden disruptions in life, losing a job and things like that. Well, then you start, and if those things keep happening to you, the constant transformation in life when the rule of the first and the eighth have hard aspect. So those constant transformations push the person towards looking for something deep and a meaning, trying to find security in unsecure life, emotional security. So they start investigating the occult, astrology, past lifetimes. So this is what happened. And such topics become part of their path in life. The rule of the first is your path in life, your destiny. The rule of the eighth is such topics, occult, conspiracies, taboo, topics about death. I was obsessed about death. Why? Because I was scared, and I'm still scared from death. So I've read like 100 books on near-death experiences. And again, because it's an opposition, there is some kind of a compulsion that feels uncomfortable. And it pushes me to really deeply research, because the role of the eighth is Mercury. Mercury is to study, to research, to fill your head with information, so you can slowly shift the scared perspective of Saturn, which is me. Saturn, the ruler of the first, opposes Mercury. So Saturn is to give fear as well. So about topics of the eighth house, death, the occult, those conspiracies, and such topics. But it can even stress you out a lot when it's an opposition, but it's still part of your path in life. And that's what I even do. You see, one aspect already describes that I have a business. I didn't want to start it so easy, that I might have some challenges in my romantic life, challenges with first child, especially in disciplining, challenge, and that I might be into the occult and studying and researching, possibly because of fear, but I'm forced in that by such topics, by external circumstances. And of course, the rule of the eighth can mean that the person is drawn to, and can, with the opposition of the first, can mean that the person suddenly dies. I would much rather die suddenly than slowly, slowly, slowly. It doesn't show longevity. You can die suddenly at 95, or some sudden other shock in life can happen. That the person is also very psychological. The ruler of the eighth is about researching, and it is Mercury. It likes to study. So it immediately becomes, and those reversals in life, again, because Mercury helps Saturn as a friend to it, eventually play out very well. It's, thanks God, I was afraid of death, and I needed to know, to find some security in those constant crisis that were happening in my life. So I started studying the occult and so on. And also the rule of the eighth means your partner's money. Opposition, the rule of the first. Always till the age of 35, whenever I'll be with a romantic partner, because Mercury is also the rule of the fifth, and it's a ruler of the eighth as well, it means other people's resources. I would end up having conflict for money because my partners would take my money, basically. It's like I'll give them to them for something and they'll take it away. But currently, it's again other people's money. It means that sooner or later you're forced to learn the lessons of how to deal with other people's money. It's because the ruler of the first is Saturn, how to put boundaries and how to not, this cannot make you suddenly, when the rule of the first and the eighth in an opposition, gain money from others suddenly very fast. Like, for example, your partner, you marry a very rich person or you get a big inheritance, is a difficult aspect. Eight houses, other people's resources. It's not going to happen, but you can build together gradually and slowly, because the rule of the first is Saturn, by studying more. Mercury, the rule of the eighth, by investigating, by no sudden, by intelligence, so to speak. Okay, but then Saturn is also the rule of the 12th. What happens when the rule of the 12th is opposite the rule of the fifth, Mercury? 12 is losses. 5 is speculation and gambling. I would say this person can't win. I don't know how many times I tried playing at casinos. Always, or gambling or playing lotto. Well, unless the two planets were friends and they were the positive planets like Jupiter and the Sun, then a person can actually win from a lotto. But this can take them really much out of their comfort zone, even with the difficult aspect. But the rule of the 12th is Saturn, opposing the rule of the fifth, games of luck and chances, sudden gains through gambling or speculative investments. Well, and Saturn rules losses, so it's not going to happen. So such a person shouldn't do speculative investments. Okay, fifth house, Mercury, ruler also rules children, opposite the ruler of the 12th. They can be losses of a child. Or Mercury also rules the eighth house, pregnancies, and I've had 2 pregnancy losses, spontaneous abortions, or even planned abortions. So this is that can happen when the rule of the fifth and the 12th are in oppositions. Or the ruler of the 8th and 12th as well, because one is pregnancies, the other one is children. I pray to God, no, it doesn't have to go to extreme level like loss or death, but it can be that rule of the 12th also rules faraway places, that your firstborn, the rule of the 5th, moves away to live far away, or that you have some distance with them, or that you see your child gets connected to the 12th Lord. And the 12th Lord for them is their 8th Lord, because the 12th house from the 5th is the 8th house, basically. So they might be into occult as well. They might be into deep study and research. They might have some kind of also 12th house qualities to them. They can be, the good side is they can be spiritual. And they might not get there willingly, but this is a combination that your firstborn can have spiritual hidden talents, or your firstborn can be 12th house a healer of some sort, or someone artistic. 5th house is also your own creativity. So when it's opposed by the 12th house, you might be forced with the opposition into prolonged periods of, 12th house is isolation, imagination, because of creating something. Because of creative work, it might be writing, it might be recording videos, it might be, because the rule of the fifth is Mercury, it's something mercurial, thinking, writing, not so much artistic, but it pushes you into prolonged periods of isolation. You're not very happy about it, is the 12th, but you're doing it. And again, it plays out great. You see even hard aspects. I'm telling you the story basically of my whole life just with one aspect. I have one difficult aspect in my horoscope, and that's this one. And it describes the most challenging things in my life and the things that actually took me to the best position in life. So you can't say to such people, stay away from creative things because they bring losses. No, I'm constantly being creative. I'm writing, I'm doing videos, I'm, I'm creating businesses. Yes, of course, I have losses there as well, but it's the other meaning of the 12th house is puts you in isolation, puts you into more spiritual mode as well. That's another thing. Puts you in contact with, or this can be a combination of channeling. 12 houses where you channel from higher places, from the invisible world. You can be channeling creativity or inspiration from there as well. So you see, um, especially if there is some friendship between the planets, it works out great. Or some mutual reception. We'll talk about that in the course. If you take it with me, it's very easy to see if you have mutual receptions or connections. The friendships between the planets is super easy. So you see, that's another 12th house opposite the ruler, the rule of the 12th opposite the rule of the fifth, the losses through boyfriends or girlfriends. And fifth house is how you have fun. Well, the rule of the 12 also means addictions, escapism, uh, and on the lower scale, it can mean self-sabotaging yourself. So initially, my first 20 years of life, I was having fun by things that were very self-sabotaging, self-dissolving, ego-dissolving, the 12. It was addictive, it was drinking, um, it was even recreational drugs, because it's opposition, and because the ruler of the 12 is Saturn, it was very hard to stop those things, because whenever Saturn is involved, you're just so set in that if you start doing it, so I would advise such a parent, when I saw this, especially with Saturn being the ruler of the fifth, that once they learn one behavior of escaping reality, which is unhealthy, they'll find it so hard to quit it. But again, with Saturn, everything after repeated efforts later in life, it works out. And the higher manifestation of the ruler of the 12th opposite the ruler of the fifth is that their fun, their way of enjoying themselves and feeling connected can be more spiritual. This is the higher meaning of the 12 houses instead of losses and addictions. It can be more spiritual in the sense of nature, meditation, or uh, they can creatively channel, as we said. Okay, I'm not gonna delve much more because it's like we can pass through so many. Then the ruler of the the ruler of the 12th opposition the ruler of the 8th. Well, that's something that is quite, two malefic rulers, rule of 12 and 8 in difficult aspects. They can be, losses, the rule of the 12, through partners' resources, the ruler of the 8. They can be or through mutual investments or to some stock investments, or they can be um, losses through, uh, let's say, or also, sorry, sometimes I lose my train of thought. They can be crises that they experience in faraway places, because 12 house rules foreign residence, 8th house is crisis, that push you out of your comfort zone. They can be deaths or sudden disruptions of your life, crisis, Pluto, that put you into isolation, that put you on the spiritual path as well. But also, this is a combination in ancient astrology when two malefic rulers combine, because the 12th, 8th, and 6th are known as the most difficult houses, losses, crisis. But when they combine in any aspect, this is called Viprit Yoga, which means difficult things come to you, but you overcome them and you rise from them and you make lemonade out of lemons. So even some of the worst combinations I'll give you for you to know how actually they have an amazing silver lining. So the rule of the 12 with the 8, or the ruler of the 8 with the 6, or the 12 with the 6, yes, they will bring those difficulties in life. Losses, isolation of some sort, crisis, death. 12th house is also secret enemies. 8th house is sudden reversals and stuff like that. It can bring those, battle with dark forces, or power struggles. It can bring those things, but these two malefic lords, almost like minus and minus makes plus at the end. And it's known as a yoga that you overcome those difficulties and you become stronger than them. And you see, even actually the rule of the first in a difficult aspect with the ruler of the 5th, according to ancient astrology, because we'll cover the yogas as well. This, I just gave you the interpretation first of the Western. But in the ancient astrology, there are yogas, and we're still going to use tropical zodiac. It works amazing. It works better than. If anytime you have the ruler of an angular house with the ruler of a trinal house, the trinals are fifth, ninth, the angular first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, and the first is also angular and trine. This is the greatness yoga. And greatness yoga can be, we'll speak about that, but it means that one is on the path, they fulfill their life mission. They go after what they inspired, because angular house means action. Trinal house, so the ruler of the first is action, you. Ruler of fifth is inspiration. So you act on your inspirations. Many people get inspirations, but because of external circumstances, social pressure, or financial reasons or fears, they do not act on them. But you have combination, even a difficult one, according to ancient astrology. With the difficult one, you are forced into it, but I was forced to act on my inspirations, and it creates greatness of some sort, not necessarily fame, but greatness of feeling the best life you can have by doing and going after the innate talents that you have, using your imagination and creativity and natural intelligence, which is the rule of the fifth, rules all those things. By the end of this course, which will be 60 hours, you know each house by heart what it means, because I'll repeat all the possible combinations between planets, between aspects of rulers and planets, so many times that you'd be just reciting it as you're walking, and you'd be able to do this on your own. You think like, how can she talk so fast and so much? I have not even prepared. I just prepared for one combination and then the rest just comes, because it's just by repeating it, it gets stuck in your head. So you see, but then you can look after that. What does it mean to have the ruler of the first opposite Mercury? Well, the ruler of the first is your physical body. And Mercury is thinking. It's a difficult aspect, which means there will be some challenge there. Nervous energy. Mercury rules thinking, nervous energy through thinking, overthinking. So this person might be a little bit, they might be very mercurial. And they might look more mercurial, like wear glasses, which is more intellectual type of thing. Because the first house ruler is appearance. Mercury gives you mercurial appearance. Can be more youthful. Even if it's a hard aspect, makes you look more youthful. Can have problems though with Mercury organs because of the actions of the person. Rule of the first house is your actions, your constitutions. Mercury can be lungs. Mercury can be the hands. Mercury can be there are many organs, like I'm not astrology, usually the nervous system. And this is the only thing that I took some notes about. What is Mercury opposite the ruler of the first? Too much stimulation of the perception and the mind. So Mercury rules the media as well. And the first house ruler is your social image. So they can be challenging information or media that challenges the social image, or journalists that challenge the social. You might not see face to face with the media, for example, the rule of the first Mercury, or anything mercurial like editing, like organizing things, like planning, can feel quite stressful for you because it is an opposition, but you're forced into it and you learn to do it. And definitely I feel overwhelmed. Especially, they have to be also, we talked about that, their path, the rule of the first is what your path is. So connection to Mercury, it's involved with Mercury things, information, training, communications, media, business. But the person might be resisting it at first. Exactly like I never, even to this day, editing videos, answering, doing the administrative tasks. I cringe. I don't enjoy, but I've mastered it. So that's if it was trine, the ruler of the first trine, Mercury, oh, I'll be flowing. It will be so easy to me. But there is always some kind of a force there, but it doesn't mean you can't really do it and still be successful at it. Also, Mercury shows what your mental interests are, what you think about. When it's connected to the ruler of the first, you think about body, about health, about things connected to your physical appearance as well, about exercise. So you might be talking or writing blogs about exercise. But again, because those things confront you. You can't escape them. You might not want to do it, but you life will push you there. Of course, Mercury is communications, so your communications, devices, you might, and of course, the rule of Saturn is also the rule of the 12th. The rule of the 12th opposite Mercury. Losses, losing laptops, computers, getting lost when you're traveling. Mercury is traveling. That's me. I'm like, go this way, but the GPS shows this way. It's like I'm so hard with left and right as well, because 12th house is when you're confused, when you're lost about something, when you make a mistake. Mercury is your orientation ability, your ability to plan. So again, those things feel exhausting. The rule of the 12 makes you exhausted. The rule of the 12 drains you from anything. With Mercury, mercurial tasks drain you. And talking can be draining, and I do a lot of that. So that exhausts my life force, because the rule of the first is your life force with the opposition of Mercury, but it is part of your path. You can't escape it. The rule of the 12 as well, sorry, it's draining. The rule of the 12 opposite Mercury can mean also so many things. 12 rules sleep. Opposition is some travel. Mercury, so this person is going to have trouble sleeping. Why? Because they're overthinking. They're planning in their head what they're going to say, their business date, next day, the smallest details trying to plan, that drives them crazy. This is so true. And also, Mercury rules friends. Well, when it's with the rule of the 12, they might be in faraway places. It doesn't mean you will fight with friends so much, but they might be far away, distant, or you might lose some friends as well. Mercury means socializing. With the opposition of, the ruler of the 12 means that there's some kind of social isolation for this person, you see. But 12th house is also deep research and deep thinking, so deep research. So Mercury with the rule of the 12th makes the mind very contemplative, can go within and download information again, contemplating. Maybe it's not going to come easy to them, it's an opposition. Maybe it will take them some efforts, repeated efforts, especially because the rule of the 12th is Saturn. Also, the rule of the 12th is mistakes. Mercury is information. They can, like, I rush always, don't fact check stuff. Not that I trust the fact checkers nowadays, but sometimes I would say something, 100 million billionaires, it's like, it's actually 1,000, or kind of exaggerates, doesn't check facts. This is possible with the ruler of the 12th. Difficult aspect with Mercury, confuse details and information, problems with business and details, because the 12th house is where you don't focus much. You actually stop thinking there. Accounts, 12th house rules also chaos. When something is in disarray, it has the energy of Pisces. So Mercury rules one's accounts, one's credit cards, one's daily routine, the organization in the house even, and they can be chaos there with the rule of the 12th conjunct Mercury. It can also mean someone zones out. Mercury is thinking. 12th house is like, with one leg in another world. They talk to you, but you're like, la, 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 la. You're thinking about something else. You see, this is all me. Just one combination between Mercury and Saturn can tell you so much. But then Saturn aspecting opposition, the ruler of the 5th and 8th. This immediately tells you Saturn delays and gives obstacles and insecurities. The rule of the 5th is your romantic life and happiness in love. It immediately delays that. The rule of the 5th, or gives it to be with older people, such because Saturn rules older. When it aspects the rule of the 5th house, your romantic life either improves later in life, and you need to make repeated efforts and conscious efforts. And you check how you do that. You do it because Saturn rules the 1st house by yourself. Mercury rules the 5th house and the 8th house, maybe through the occult as well. But repeated efforts in your romantic life. And you get it eventually. 4th time right, 6th time right, 20th time right. Saturn might be the 40th time right. Or they can have insecurities about their romantic life. 5th house ruler also rules romantic life. So Saturn opposing it, too many responsibilities block the romantic life. Too many duties block the romantic life. Or rule of the fifth house is your child, it's firstborn, delayed. I gave birth for the first time at 37, something like that. You see, delay, sometimes it might even mean, if they're both enemies, the ruler of, say, Saturn and the ruler of the fifth, if they're enemies, that the person might not want children at all. But in my case, they're not. The child wanted me because Mercury loves Saturn. So it says, I'll sort you out. I'm coming. So the ruler of the Saturn, opposite the rule of the fifth is to have fun. Well, it might be hard to have fun because you have too many responsibilities, Saturn. Also, when you learn some kind of having fun, it's so hard to get out of it, Saturn. You know, it's like, and also you're not very, the fifth house is being creative. Your creativity develops later in life after repeated efforts. It doesn't come naturally to you, let's say, creativity. And it doesn't mean making pottery and singing. Anything is creative, whether you make a business, whether you sit and write something that you taught yourself, whether you have a new idea. So you might feel insecure with your intelligence. This is true intelligence, independent thinking, not repetitive thinking. The true intelligence is the ruler of the fifth house. So you might have, you know, you're intelligent, but you feel suppressed earlier, till 30 maybe, that you're not as intelligent. You feel that your true talents, the rule of the fifth rules, your true talents that are the most natural to you, your true inspirations, they emerge later in life. And it also can indicate limited hobbies and ways to entertain yourself. Later age, because Saturn is involved, they become a bit more, but currently it's just astrology. That's my passion and hobby. So, you know, the person is kind of narrow-minded about their hobby, so they're kind of afraid to try new things until they start getting older, because Saturn is getting older. But what does it mean, Saturn to be opposite the ruler of the eighth? You see, Saturn opposite the ruler of the eighth can indicate that you kind of have blockages receiving from others. You don't feel worthy to receive from others, because the eighth house ruler shows, can you receive from others? How do you think you deserve to receive without actually having to give back always? And that was always something that, you know, and it reflected in that I never wanted to receive anything from another person. And I only learned after my 35th year onwards, how to receive and how to say thank you when someone, fifth house is what others, eighth house, sorry, is what others want to give to you, to say thank you, to reward you in some way. And I was always no, 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 because Saturn resists that. It's also like till the age of 37, 8, I could never benefit materially, because Saturn restricts, not allow from partners' resources. For example, it was always that we had it, you know, I was trying, you know, to find someone, especially before I had business, and I was like, I want to find someone that can support me. And I was looking, Saturn opposition the ruler of the eighth. This is not gonna happen. If it happens, it comes later in life. You know, and it never worked till then. And you have to work hard together. So this is what happened. We've been working hard together with my husband, and now the resources are growing. So you can see so much. Oh, eighth house, inheritance. With Saturn opposition, tough chance I'll receive an inheritance, so unless it's very late in life or after 40, 50, you know. Eighth house is taxes. Saturn is very strict. So if you make mistakes on your taxes, when Saturn is opposing eighth house, you'll see quick repercussions. So you have to be careful, you know. So all of those things, you see how many things you can see. It's incredible. Or eighth house rules death and your perception of death. Saturn is fear. Saturn is you're resistant. Also, it means you linger on longer in life. When Saturn affects the ruler of the eighth, even in a hard aspect, because Saturn is how quick, eighth house is how quickly you go through transformations, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a loss of identity, whether it's loss of any kind of sudden change. So when Saturn is there, such a person especially in earlier age, has a lot of difficulty and resistance to that. And even in later age, such person will resist it. They'll hang on to life. They'll not want to transition on the other side. So usually this gives longevity, but because Saturn is also the ruler of the first connecting with the eighth, they can die suddenly, but in longevity. So you see, you can say such things. It's kind of shocking. It's kind of incredible how much you can see just from an aspect. And you'd probably think my life sucks because I've been just talking about one aspect that is hard. But believe me, I have 10 others that are trines only. And you don't want only trines and sextiles, because then you're lazy as F. I mean, then you don't, nothing pushes you out of your comfort zone. You know, the trines and sextiles, they're natural talents that you have. But unless something comes here to, especially oppositions, means someone else pushes you in that direction, provokes you, upsets you, and you decide, and you, or outer circumstances, the square as well, some obstacles and problems. And these are the engines of the horoscope, you know. But if you have only squares and oppositions, then that's another kind of extreme. And it's, so you see, one aspect, and I usually love to take the most difficult and exact aspect and, you know, go with it. And you see that my most difficult aspect is the one that basically describes the most difficult things in my life and the biggest successes that I did because I didn't want to. I didn't want to do them, but I was forced into them. So it's incredible. I cannot describe you how much you're going to learn from this. And how I would love you to join me. You can pay in installments, or if you're watching this video years from now, it will be available, this course. You can use it like a book of a reference book. We'll segment each aspect. You'll have access to each aspect just by a click, so you can listen to what I talk about such aspects. And yeah, and of course, when you have a difficult aspect, it's very important to see if there is a good aspect coming towards this difficult aspect, just to give it some help, because you still have to work on those issues. You still cannot avoid them, but they can be some relief a little bit. And in my case, for example, the relief that I receive is from Uranus, sextile, out of sign, but still sextile to the Saturn, and out of sign trine to this Mercury, but especially to Saturn. So what has helped me in those difficult crises that I talked about, and losses and reversals and you know, challenges? Well, it's been Uranus. Uranus is astrology, and Uranus is in my 10th house of career. So when I started explaining those stuff, and astrology has been my saving grace, and alternative knowledge, alternative information, that's one thing that gives me relief from this mental overload, this mental overstimulation. And that's actually, if you have a good aspect towards a difficult aspect, you can channel all the difficulty of this aspect and resolve it through the planet that is sending the good aspect. And in my case, all those challenges I've experienced in love life, they pushed me towards astrology. And I now understand a lot more because of that. Challenges of a loss of loved ones, fifth house ruler Mercury, loved ones, Saturn, ruler of eighth, you know, again, pushed me towards astrology. And it's and the delay of my creative ability to express myself, the delay of my confidence, the delay of my ability to express myself verbally as well. Mercury also rules brothers. The rule when siblings, when the ruler of the 12th, in this case is Saturn, is opposite, the rule is opposite Mercury siblings, you can lose siblings. I've lost one sibling to a vaccine, and almost the other one as well, on the same time, pneumonia vaccine. And they were both vaccinated, and they both developed a pneumonia within a week, and one passed away. So be careful, especially with babies, with those things. That's why I'm very anti such things. But you see, and you start digging and saying those losses, why are they there? And And what helped me was astrology. And I channeled all this into astrology. Uranus also means it's in the 10th house of career, also means alternative knowledge. So there is always a saving grace, almost always to a difficult aspect. If there is not a saving grace, it's just a bit harder. There is not something to take the pressure off, but they can be friends, the two planets. And sometimes there are some difficult aspect that really kind of you really can't move past it. Sometimes it's almost like the soul, because the planets are enemies, they're in signs that don't like each other. There's no helpful aspect. They rule difficult houses. And then some, it's very rare. I almost always find the saving grace. I almost always find the channel. But sometimes in those rare occasions, then you kind of, it's like the pain sits there and it's almost like unresolvable problem. And then I ask people to channel on to focus on other positive aspects, and to maybe this might be resolved in another lifetime, but no, you always have to work on those things. It's just sometimes it's just so painful, just like a person who is so painful, they're so pained themselves that you want to help them, but the best choice, and you love them, is to leave them alone, to be distance from them. Very rare, very, very rare occasions we have such aspects in the horoscope as well. But I will teach you how to always find the solution. So do join me. This was a lecture focused on me. Ta-da! That's why I'm here. Because I know my life, but how you see how one aspect has 8 interpretations, and how you can tie it in, and you can find ways how to solve that, and how it will manifest. Just one aspect can tell your life story. So welcome to the fascinating world of aspects. Let's explore them together. I might actually release even one of the lectures for free, but it will be 60 hours of lectures. I'm looking forward to have you on my course. Love you. Bye.